Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I'm joined by our expert analyst.
Hello.
Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into just one single comprehensive source, but it's one that paints a pretty dramatic picture of proposed changes for Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's quite something. Our mission today really is to unpack a recent public address. It outlines a significant, maybe even radical shift in how Washington, D.C. is governed.
Especially, it seems, concerning public safety and law enforcement.
Exactly. This deep dive, it's going to illuminate the reasons given, the specific ways they plan to do it, the mechanisms, and just the broader context that the speaker presents in this source material.
Right. We're talking about a detailed look at asserting federal authority over the District of Columbia's public safety. It's a move the speaker in our source presents as, well, urgent and absolutely necessary.
And we should probably mention the source itself.
Yes, good point. Our sole source for this deep dive is an excerpt from a video transcript. It's titled Full L. Trump deploys National Guard to D.C. in bid to fight crime, D.C. police under federal control. That's from the YouTube channel ABC 7 News, WJLA.
So it's a speech, very direct, delivered with a strong sense of conviction.
Definitely. And we're going to try and extract all the key nuggets of insight for you, kind of peel back the layers of the argument and really understand the vision it lays out for the nation's capital.
Because the speaker in this address, they lay out a strong, almost emphatic case for urgent action. They detail what they perceive as a city in, well, profound crisis.
And propose some pretty radical solutions to match.
Right. So we'll guide you through the claims about crime, the specific legal frameworks they're invoking, the personnel being deployed, who's in charge.
And even the sort of philosophical underpinnings driving this shift.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how comprehensive it is. It's not just law enforcement. It extends into things like urban beautification, even judicial reform, all laid out in this one speech.
So if you're ready to understand the full scope, the full implications of this moment, at least according to our source, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Okay, segment 1. Declaring the crisis. This is where it all starts. The premise for this dramatic action.
And the speaker opens with this highly charged declaration. It immediately sets that tone of extreme urgency, crisis.
They call the event Liberation Day in D.C., which is quite a phrase.
It really is. And the stated purpose, to, quote, rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
The language is just incredibly vivid. It's clearly designed not just to inform, but, to evoke alarm, a sense of desperate need for immediate action.
Yeah, it frames D.C. not as just struggling, but as having fallen into this, catastrophic state of chaos.
Yeah.
Which, serves a rhetorical purpose.
Right. It establishes the emergency to justify the intervention that follows.
Exactly. And the rhetoric, it is intense. Painting a picture of a city entirely out of control, the speaker explicitly says, we're going to take our capital back.
That phrase, take our capital back, what does that imply exactly?
Well, it implies a loss of control by the current authorities, right? That the city's been effectively ceded to criminal elements, and an external force is now needed to reclaim it. It's framed as repossession, not cooperation.
Which raises the obvious question. What specific conditions are being cited to justify such a dire assessment? What's the evidence offered in the source?
Good question. Because the source is quite direct in providing specific claims about crime, aiming to back up this grim picture.
Yeah, the speaker asserts that, quote, the murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City. Some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher.
Wow, that's a stark comparison.
And they back it up with a specific figure, saying, DC 41 per 100,000, number one that we can find anywhere in the world.
Number one,
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world. That's a very, very strong claim. Superlative almost. Clearly designed to shock.
Absolutely. It sets this dramatic backdrop against which the federal actions are then presented as, well, not just necessary, but imperative.
And it's not just murders, right? The source details other escalating crime figures that add to this narrative.
Right. We hear that the number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled.
Doubled and tripled. I mean, those aren't small increases. That suggests a significant accelerating trend in certain types of crime.
And they also claim murders in 2023 reached the highest rate probably ever, or at least in 25 years.
So it provides this quantitative, albeit one-sided justification for calling it a horror show, as the speaker does. The cumulative effect is a sense of pervasive, worsening crime.
And the speaker doesn't just use numbers, they paint these vivid, almost hyperbolic pictures of the
Right,
perpetrators.
describing the Capitol as, quote, overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged-out maniacs, and homeless people.
It's a really broad categorization. It attributes crime to several distinct, easily demonized groups, creates a comprehensive threat narrative.
Yeah, it kind of lumps various segments of the population together as the direct cause of the city's alleged decline. Removes nuance, creates clear villains.
And then the impact is personalized,
Hmm.
made visceral, through these harrowing anecdotes.
Which are always a powerful rhetorical tool. The source recounts, for instance, a former member of the DOJ staff was savagely beaten, left dripping in blood with a broken nose and concussion.
Terrible. And a 21-year-old congressional intern was tragically killed after being hit by a stray bullet.
Also mentions a former Trump administration official named Mike Gill, who was murdered last year in cold blood in a carjacking blocks away from the White House.
And it even touches political figures directly. A Democrat congressman was also carjacked at gunpoint, and an aide to Senator Rand Paul was stabbed.
And perhaps most horrifically, the example of a 3-year-old girl who was shot in the head and killed while sitting in a car near the Cap over a July 4th weekend.
These specific examples, they really underscore the perceived lawlessness. They bring the stats down to a human level.
And strategically, many involve individuals connected to the federal government or public life, which emphasizes the threat to the core of the Capitol, suggests even the powerful aren't immune.
The speaker even addresses reporters directly in the audience, saying, quote, "You people are victims of it too. You don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed, and you all know people and friends of yours that happened."
That's an interesting move, trying to bridge perceived divides by appealing to that universal desire for safety.
Yeah, including the reporters in the victim pool, trying to bypass ideology, unite them under common ground. The message is, this affects everyone.
So that's the crisis firmly established, according to the source, which naturally leads to the proposed solutions.
Exactly. Segment 2, the federal takeover mechanisms and leadership, shifting from diagnosis to action.
And it's presented as very clear, direct, authoritative federal intervention.
The speaker announces, quote, "Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act."
Okay, Section 740, that's the key legal point here, presented as the foundation for, quote, placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control.
So what is the Home Rule Act, just briefly, and why is invoking this specific section such a big deal?
Right. Well, the Home Rule Act of 1973, that was landmark legislation. It granted D.C. a significant degree of self-governance for the first time in like a century. Elected mayor, city council, control over local affairs, including the MPD.
So local democracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Section 740 is this specific, rarely used provision. It reserves the president the power to take extraordinary measures, like direct control over the police during declared emergencies or civil disorder.
So using it means
It signifies a direct federal override of those local democratic processes. A huge shift, bypassing local control, bringing the MPD directly under federal authority. It implies a total lack of faith in the local administration's ability to manage public safety.
And it's not just federalizing the MPD. The speaker also declares, "I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C."
And note the phrasing there. The Guard will be allowed to do their job properly.
Yeah, what's the implication there? That they weren't allowed before.
It suggests they face restrictions, maybe from local authorities, or their rules of engagement were too tight. Federalizing the deployment implies they'll now operate without that perceived local interference, unleashed in a way.
Reinforces the idea of a comprehensive federal presence, unburdened by alleged local weakness.
And the intervention isn't just about laws and troops. It's very much about leadership, centralizing power.
Right. Attorney General Pam Bondi is announced as, quote, "taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department as of this moment."
That's highly significant. Centralizes authority right at the top of the federal executive branch, places the MPD under the direct command of the AG.
Bypassing the local police chief, the mayor.
Completely, signaling a total federal assumption of operational control, a very top-down approach.
And she's not alone in this new structure. The speaker introduces Terry Cole, described as the new DEA administrator.
And he's designated as the, quote, interim federal commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department.
So bringing the DEA's focused drugs trafficking directly into local policing.
Seems so. And then there's Gatti Serrata, the U.S. Marshal, who will be, quote, supervising command and control the entire operation.
The Marshal Service, they handled judicial security, fugitives.
Right. So his role indicates this multi-agency federal effort. Clear lines of authority, drawing on a broad spectrum of federal law enforcement capabilities. It conveys overwhelming force and competence.
And the list continues. Our Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and I will be working with him closely, along with our great FBI Director Cash Battle.
Involving the FBI, the main investigative arm of the DOJ, just underscores the seriousness and scope.
And then there's the, quote, secret weapon.
Ah, yes. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, described as one of the toughest prosecutors and a former judge.
And her specific mandate, targeting juvenile crime, which the Speaker presents as out of control.
Yeah, including someone like Pirro, known for a tough stance, really highlights the aggressive approach intended for prosecution, especially in that specific area identified as problematic.
So it's this comprehensive team, a very top-down, centralized approach, aiming to reform not just law enforcement, but the whole justice system.
And speed is emphasized.
Yeah.
The Speaker says, we're not looking to take years because a lot of people die in years.
That conveys real urgency, demands swift, impactful action.
And the promise is a very safe city very soon,
Mm-hmm.
setting that expectation of rapid, tangible results, positioning the federal takeover as the only efficient path.
Okay, so that's the what and the how. Now let's get into the why, according to the source. Segment 3, diagnosing the problem, radical left, policies, and weakness.
Right, because having laid out the emergency and the response, the Speaker then points fingers, identifies the root causes, laying blame squarely on specific policies and ideologies.
This is where it gets really interesting. The Speaker asserts, quote, this dire public safety crisis stems directly from the abject failures of the city's local leadership, the radical left city council.
That's direct, unequivocal. Framing the crisis not as complex, but as a direct consequence of political choices made locally, sets up a clear ideological opposition as the source of the problem.
And what's identified as the primary culprit for this breakdown?
No cash bail. The Speaker states quite emphatically, quote, every place in the country where you have no cash bail is a disaster. That's what started the problem in New York. That's what started it in Chicago.
Can you just quickly explain what no cash bail generally refers to?
Sure. It's a reform policy aiming to eliminate requiring money for pretrial release. Instead, release decisions are based on factors like flight risk or danger to the community, not ability to pay. Proponents say it stops jailing people just because they're poor.
But the Speaker here presents a starkly negative view.
Extremely negative, giving the most extreme example. Somebody murders somebody, and they're out on no cash bail before the day is out, presenting it as a fundamental breakdown of justice.
The argument being the policy itself enables criminals and fuels crime.
That's exactly the assertion made in the source.
And the Speaker explicitly frames this as a partisan battle, too, saying they'll end that in Chicago and change the statute for no cash bail, but will need Republicans because, quote, the Democrats are weak on crime, totally weak on crime.
So it's not just a policy critique, it's ideological, portraying one party as fundamentally misguided, weak, ineffective on crime.
And positioning his administration as the only force capable of the necessary tough-on-crime solutions.
Which strengthens the justification for his administration leading the federal intervention.
Another key target identified as a cause, D.C. being a sanctuary jurisdiction.
Yes. The Speaker states, we have to get rid of sanctuary cities as quickly as possible, because it's sanctuary for criminals releasing illegal alien gang members onto the streets.
Again, maybe quickly define sanctuary jurisdiction.
Generally, it refers to places with policies limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, often intended to build trust between immigrant communities and local police.
But the Speaker connects it directly to urban crime.
Directly. Asserting these policies create safe havens for undocumented individuals who are also criminals. Using that phrase, sanctuary for criminals, creates a strong negative association, implying these policies enable law-breaking.
And then there's the issue of prosecution, or lack thereof.
Right. The Speaker claims that in 2022, nearly 70% of criminals arrested in Washington went unprosecuted.
Wow, 70%. If accurate, that's significant.
It's used to argue the problem isn't arrests, it's the failure of the judicial system after arrest to hold offenders accountable. Shifting blame to prosecutors, maybe the courts.
Suggesting that even when police do their job, the system fails later, perpetuating the cycle?
And the critique extends explicitly to judges. The speaker says, the judges are letting killers out. They're just saying, go, that's okay, don't worry about it.
Which directly justifies the plan to appoint new judges.
Exactly. New, tough judges to fill about 10 open spots, maybe create more, based on recommendations from Bondi, Blanche, and Pirro, implying current judges are too lenient or ineffective.
Signaling a desire to reshape the whole judicial landscape to align with this tough-on-crime philosophy.
And Janine Pirro, in her segment, really doubles down on this, especially regarding juveniles.
Right. She says, quote, I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you because the laws are weak.
And she gives that very specific, emotionally charged anecdote.
Yeah, about a 14, 17-year-old convicted of attempted murder with a gun who allegedly gets probation and is told to go to college.
Which serves as this potent illustration of what she sees as a lenient, ineffective system for young, violent criminals.
And she criticizes the D.C. Council, calls for ending yoga and arts and crafts for juvenile offenders in family court.
Asserting it changes today. It's a very strong signal. A drastic shift away from rehabilitation-focused approaches towards a much more punitive system for youth crime.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis laid out in the source, blaming local leadership, specific policies, judicial leniency. Now, segment 4, the path to restoration beyond crime.
Because the intervention described isn't just about law enforcement and courts, there's this broader vision for the capital.
Right. The source makes it clear that tackling crime goes hand in hand with a focus on the beautification of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, a holistic approach, suggesting crime and disorder are intertwined with the city's physical state, that restoring beauty is part of restoring safety and stature.
Implying physical decay mirrors social decline, demanding a dual approach.
Exactly. The speaker expresses embarrassment about the Capitol being unsafe and how dirty and disgusting this once beautiful Capitol was with graffiti all over the walls.
So the goal is safe, clean, and beautiful, to restore it to the gleaming Capitol that everybody wants it to be.
It reflects a commitment not just to safety, but to the city's symbolic importance, its physical appearance, projecting strength and order.
And the source outlines specific plans, very concrete actions.
Like getting rid of the slums, removing homeless encampments, replacing medians that are falling down, fixing potholes, putting out a nice new coat of asphalt.
It covers public health, infrastructure, protecting monuments.
And Doug Burgum from the U.S. Park Police is cited, highlighting efforts already underway, mentioning removing over 70 homeless camps and over 80 specific attacks against our history with graffiti on our monuments since a recent executive order.
Gives a tangible sense of ongoing operations in this beautification area.
Then there's a particularly striking point about police conduct.
Ah, yes. The speaker's philosophy on how officers should respond to disrespect.
When discussing dealing with individuals who, quote, spit in the face of the police, the speaker explicitly states, quote, I said, you tell them you spit and we hit, and they can hit real hard.
That signals a very aggressive, zero-tolerance posture.
A clear departure from de-escalation concepts.
Yeah.
Advocating immediate, forceful physical retaliation against defiance. Prioritizing officer authority and safety above potentially other tactics.
Underscores the tough, no-nonsense approach intended for the federalized force.
Now, what's really interesting is how the source connects this D.C. initiative to past claimed successes of the administration.
Right, building confidence in the methods. Pete Hegseth, for instance, draws a parallel to the border.
Yeah, Hegseth mentions bringing in more National Guard specialized units, saying, quote, this is nothing new for DOD, as the president noted at the border. We've got 10,000 troops down there who've been operating, where there's zero illegal crossings because of troops.
That zero illegal crossings claim. It's a powerful metric used to show the effectiveness of this tough approach elsewhere, suggesting it can work in D.C. too.
And then Kash Patel, the FBI director, adds more claimed successes, shifting to nationwide law enforcement.
He highlights over 4,000 child victims identified and found this year, a claimed 33% increase.
And the seizure of 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl, a claimed 25% increase, described as enough to kill 115 million Americans, emphasizing the scale of the threat addressed.
Also, 19,000 people arrested this year alone by the FBI, claimed to be double last year.
And 1,600 people who have committed violent acts against children arrested, including 270 human traffickers.
And these figures are presented as proof of what happens, quote, when you let good cops be cops.
Implying the federal actions in D.C. will replicate this national success by empowering law enforcement, projecting an image of effective federal crime fighting attributable to the administration's policies.
But then comes maybe the most surprising part, creating that tension within the source itself.
Right, especially given the initial focus on D.C.'s crisis. Cash Battle states that nationally, quote, the murder rates are plummeting. We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in U.S. history, in modern recorded U.S. history, thanks to this team behind me and President Trump's priorities.
That creates a real contrast, painting D.C. as this unique horror show while claiming national rates are historically low.
It subtly frames D.C. as an outlier, an exception needing this specific, drastic federal intervention because it diverges so much from the claimed positive national trend.
And finally, the speaker revisits a prior action, the executive order on monument protection.
Recalling signing a statute, supposedly from the early 1900s, mandating 10 years in jail with no probation, no anything, for touching statues.
And claiming this immediately stopped protests targeting statues of Lincoln, Jackson, Jefferson.
Effectively ending what the speaker calls a sick woke culture. This anecdote serves to show a previous instance where, according to the speaker, strong enforcement and a firm stance led to immediate results.
Reinforcing the idea that decisive top-down intervention works. Tying the D.C. plan to a broader theme of combating perceived cultural decay and restoring order via federal authority.
So quite a comprehensive picture painted in that one address.
Absolutely. Which brings us to our wrap-up. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've taken a deep dive into this very specific, very detailed public address about federal intervention in Washington, D.C.
We've heard that clear, urgent call to action, framed as Liberation Day, supported by those stark crime claims and harrowing anecdotes.
We've seen how that narrative of a city in profound crisis was constructed using statistics and personal stories provided within the source.
And the solutions outlined. A sweeping federal takeover of local police, major legislative changes targeting things like no cash bail in sanctuary cities, plus that broader vision of urban beautification.
The legal basis invoked, the specific people put in charge, the whole strategy points to a rapid, centralized, aggressive approach described in the source.
And we heard how it's all contextualized within claimed past successes, like at the border or with national crime stats, even while presenting D.C. itself as an exception requiring this intervention.
It's a very particular, very direct approach presented in the source, emphasizing speed, blaming specific local policies and ideologies.
Indeed. This deep dive into the source material really presents a complete blueprint for one particular assertive federal strategy to address perceived urban decline, as articulated by the speaker.
Which does leave you with a question to think about.
Yeah, it really does. Thinking about what's presented in this source, what might be the long-term implications of such a centralized, top-down approach to local governance and public safety, especially when it's framed with such strong rhetoric and involves, according to the speaker's plan, bypassing existing local democratic structures.
How might an intervention like the one described reshape that often delicate balance between the federal government and the nation's capital?
And what precedents, if any, might it set for federal-local dynamics elsewhere if other cities face challenges presented in a similar way?
Definitely something to mull over as you think about the future of federal-local relations based on the scenario laid out in this specific address. That wraps up another deep dive.